Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. مسموع صوتي؟ Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this literary salon with Assaad Khairallah, sponsored by the Center for Arts and Humanities, Sheikh Zayed Chair for Arabic and Islamic Studies, and the World Arabic Literary Salon. It's an evening dedicated to celebrating the life, work, and enduring influence of a scholar who has shaped not just the field of Arabic literature, but also the minds and hearts of his students, myself included. أستاذ الأساتذة, literally, he taught Tarif Bazzi and Ramzi Baalbaki.
I'm his grandfather.
So you have 4 generations of scholars of Arabic literature. So he truly deserved the title Ustadh al-Asatidha. Allow me to start with a confession. Once upon a time, I was a math major. Yes, I thought numbers held the ultimate truth. Until I met Assaad Khairallah. In the very final semester, as I navigated differential equations, complex analysis, and linear algebra, I stumbled into his modern Arabic poetry class, 238. I needed the course, not that I had any interest in modern Arabic literature. I needed the course to complete my Arabic requirements. The idea of majoring in Arabic had never crossed my mind. It felt too daring. The class worked with my schedule, and I took it. After experiencing his teaching, something shifted. I was hesitant about switching to Arabic literature after graduation, but he looked at me with his signature blend of exasperation and affection and said, you probably remember this, there is always a place at the top. He suggested the idea, encouraged me, and planted the seed that would grow into a lifelong passion. I owe him more than I can articulate. He introduced me to modern Arabic literature. But more profoundly, he dismantled the dusty glass case labeled ancient, classical, and medieval Arabic literature and showed me that these texts are as modern and urgent as anything written today and as eternal as great literature can be. Assaad Khairallah didn't just teach literature, he breathed life into it. He knew it all, almost too much. His lectures were like a literary roller coaster, thrilling, intense, occasionally disorienting, but always leaving you wanting more. In his classes, he mixed genres, life stories, people he met, students who graduated, cinema, theater, novels, religion, mythology, psychology, psychoanalysis, world literature, and even physics and mathematics. Everything was connected, and it made sense. Each lecture was a rich mosaic of ideas drawn from across disciplines, making literature not just a subject, but an experience. I was fortunate to take a graduate course on criticism with him, and even luckier to serve as his research assistant. From him, I learned not just about texts, but about the art of scholarship itself. How to clip 2 papers from the side so that they fold neatly. Remember this? Trust me, it's an underrated skill. How to review and edit articles for Al-Abhath journal, which he was its editor, of course. And most importantly, how to ask the big questions without ever overlooking the small ones. In all, he treated me like a scholar, and he valued my opinion. He took me seriously, and that's important.
Very good.
Today, we gather to celebrate Dr. Khairallah's academic journey, his achievements, and his intellectual legacy, especially his contributions to world literature after retirement. But beyond the honors and publications, we celebrate Assaad, the scholar who is as funny as he is brilliant, perpetually and endearingly complaining, yet endlessly loving and generous with his time. And to many of us, a fatherly figure in the world of ideas. For those unfamiliar with his distinguished career, Dr. Assaad Khairallah earned his PhD in Arabic, Persian, and comparative literature from Princeton University. He taught at Princeton, Freiburg, Basel, and Berkeley before returning to AUB as a full professor, where he profoundly impacted generations of students and scholars, and many of which are here in the room today. His primary fields of interest include Arabic literature, mainly modern, cultural East-West relations, and comparative and world literature. He has authored the influential Love, Madness, and Poetry, an interpretation of the Majnun legend, which is a book here published by the Orient Institute, and it's still the best book written on the subject. And around 30 scholarly articles across English, Arabic, German, and French. Each and every single one of them opens a whole field of study. He co-edited a 4-volume work for the Blackwell Literature, a world history. These are the 4 volumes here, published last year or 2 years ago. He is currently completing a monograph on modern Arabic poetry and another on Majnun Layla. Both are promised for the Sheikh Zayed series for Islamic Studies, Arabic and Islamic Studies here at the AUB Press. This evening, we honor not just his scholarly contributions, but the living, breathing legacy he has built through his teaching, mentorship, and unwavering curiosity. So let's dive into the conversation, guided by questions that reflect the depth and breadth of his remarkable career. Dr. Khairallah, thank you for everything and for teaching us that literature, like life, is always more complex, more beautiful, and more urgent than we think. Please join me in welcoming Assaad Khairallah to AUB. So we'll dive into the conversation. Welcome to the World Literary Salon.
Thank you, Verki. Now I'm going to mix up with German. Excuse me, because when I'm speaking another language than Arabic, now German comes to mind. So, Lauda? Okay. So you learn a couple of words of German in the meantime. Bilal, this is really touching, really. And Bilal mentioned something that I remember very well. He was top student. I knew his teacher in mathematics. And one of these days he comes, I still remember where I was sitting, where he says, I want to shift to Arabic. And I told him, ما بدك تاكل خبز يعني. قال لي شو يعني؟ قلت له an hour of mathematics, if you teach, you gain 3 times as an hour of Arabic. يعني شو؟ قال لي لا, I want to study. قلت له يا ابني بكره بتندم. قال لي لا, I want to study Arabic. Then I told him, go and do an استخارة. You know what's an استخارة? اختار من الله انه يلهمك a week and come back. After a week he comes and says, I did an istikhara, I want to study Arabic. Then I told him, okay, go ahead, there's always a place on top. And as a matter of fact, he's the top of the top now. يعني alhamdulillah. A word from Bilal means a lot to me.
So I want to go to the beginning, to your academic path. before setting the ground into world literature and how you stumbled into this category, world literature. Your academic journey has taken you from Beirut, probably from IC, right?
From Hamdoun.
From Hamdoun, even, yeah.
Yeah.
So then to Germany, to the US. How did these different experiences shape the way you think about Arabic literature in relation to the world?
Yeah. Well, I mentioned Hamdoun because really Hamdoun was my luck. First, it was my luck to be born. My father was a young man with the First World War, so he left school and they used to study in Alay, in this Jamia al-Wataniya that was headed by Maroun Aboud later with his two brothers, but he had to go with his older brother to Haran to bring wheat and stuff. So he left school after the certificate, what, six years or something like that. My mother came from Dar al-Amar with Bustani. She's the cousin of Bustani, who was the head of the Lebanese University, and etc. And she was pretty, for those days, yani seconde or something like this, near the baccalaureate, and she taught at the École des Apôtres in Fallujah, one of these schools that this Fallujah was built in, grounded in 1838 as missionaries. Anyway, so she knew Arabic and Persian, French and English and Latin. I still have her Latin prayer book. And so she came also from a very well educated family. And she has a great influence on the Hamdounis, who were with time pretty well-to-do, but who would stop the certificate or brevet or khalas, except the Protestants. We have a branch of the Khairallahs who became Presbyterian or evangelic with the Syrian college, and one of the first graduates is Assaad Khairallah, like my name. And now I inherited a piece of land in Hamdoun that comes from, I know, the grandson of his wife. Anyway, this is one thing. I'm born in a hotel, and the hotel in those days were only Egyptians, Syrian, bit Iraqis, Palestinians, and we had the whole summer with about 20 kids of different dialects and different religions. We had a Jewish family from Iraq, 7 daughters. I mean, the beauty, they stole our gramophone anyway at the end and went to Israel. And we had the Egyptians, stories and dialects and all kinds. This is in childhood. But whatever I remember now, what Bilal said about how I taught, I taught like what my theory is about Arabic literature. I taught dardasha, if you wish, mixing everything together. يعني من كل وادي عصا, but there is a sense in I want to install in these young people's head this kind of worldview or this way of analyzing things, consciously or unconsciously in my method. And this is what I discovered about Arabic literature. When we were kids, I still remember, because Hamdoun, the village, the old Hamdoun, was inhabited in winter. So there were schools there. Hamdoun, the Mahatta, yani station, was for summer. There were many hotels. But in winter, there would be few people and there were no classes. So I had to go to the old Hamdoun and walk a lot in snow. So I used to stay 2-3 months hard winter by my grandmother, my uncle and brother. Uncle was fiancé to a cousin of Kamal Salibi. who also studied till certificate, but she was such a red woman. She was fantastic. She reads French, English, all kinds of stories. When cooking, she is, etc. And she was a fantastic storyteller. She would go with her friends to a movie, and when they come back, she starts to tell the story. They feel they have seen nothing. I mean, she fascinates them with that. And I still remember I used to go when my uncle was, you know, when there's fiancés, they go and visit the family. And so our kid, 9 years old, used to go with my uncle and my grandmother, and she would tell me stories. But the first story was The Merchant of Venice. But she tells it in such a way that you can't forget it. But the interesting thing, and this came in the book, the interesting thing is the game they played. Her father knew probably most of it. He was a ma'mari, and my uncle too. They were contractors, and they worked together. And they played what is called Souk Aukaz. Souk Aukaz, it was the great market in the Jahiliyyah and later also Marbid, where people exchanged goods like camels or bought and sold things. And at the same time, it was a forum where they exposed their fantastic oratory, art, and poetry. Nabigha Zubyani was a judge there in the Souk Aukaz. And this Souk Aukaz as a game, I don't know if any of you was under, were you possibly there, Hamdi? No. Well, in my time, this is ages ago, we could sit in a circle after dinner or when you sit in a circle, Nabil, you sit in a circle and you say one verse. شو بدنا نقول؟ قول يا سعد لا تشتري العبد إلا والعصا معه إن العبيد لأنجاس مناكيد دع عنك لومي فإن اللوم إغراء وداوي بالتي كانت هي الداء أنا الذي نظر الأعمى إلى أبي وأسمعت كلماتي من به صمم ميم ما so and the one who stops is out and at the end there is a winner because he knows that. Now as a kid sitting with older people, I was the only kid but you know a kid learns very good, so I learned a lot of them, but I will play this as an argument for my theory of Arabic literature, what made Arabic literature great, poetry and non-poetry. This game is played in Algeria, called Souk Aukaz, I learned that from Shafiqa Wa'id. This game is played in Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan. They call it Musha'ara. But their form of play is not verse by verse, but couplet by couplet or a qit'a, etc. And I'll come back to this because of its importance.
What I understood
to the
is
theory.
that your perception of Arabic literature was perceived, your perception of Arabic literature was perceived globally from the beginning. From pre-Islamic poetry, Souk Aukaz, this game, to the Merchant of Venice, French, English, etc. So kind of you were destined to work on world literature from the beginning. I want to talk a little bit about AUB because you served as an AUB professor for many years, and you were a link between my generation and a generation that I didn't meet. Hassan Abbas, Muhammad Yusuf Najm, even Khalil Hawi, for example, etc. What was the role of Arabic at AUB, and what role did AUB play in shaping Arabic literature internationally as well, not just in the Arab world?
Yes, very good. Yeah, also AUB we have to start with the beginning. You know, AUB as a Syrian Protestant college started practically in the house of Boutros al-Bustani, Muallim Boutros al-Bustani, one of the very few Maronites who became Protestant, and he's a translator also of the Bible. So from there, Bustani has a lecture on Lugha al-Arabiya. It's fantastic, and he had such an influence of simplifying Arabic, and he had a kind of worship for بقول لو لم يكن ذلك كفرا لقلت إنه العربية مقدسة fantastic, and his greatest contribution is the simplification of the language. He was a missionary, so he wanted people to understand, and this is the influence of the Protestants and the Jesuits. The Protestants more, because they want to spread their religion, their fikr. So they do not want to have this balagha and the common people don't understand. And then you get people of the 20th century, you know, people like Jabr Doumet, it was wonderful, Anis al-Maqdisi, fantastic. About all of them knew at least one foreign language. This is very important. It's not like the old Arab linguists or literary or scholars or critics. And then you get a whole bunch from the 50s and down.
And it was also secular, right? Because most of these were not Muslims. They also knew other languages. It wasn't connected to divinity schools.
Yeah,
right? It was a secular approach to Arabic.
This is the greatness of AUB. We must admit that. I mean, it's called at the beginning a Syrian Protestant, but in fact, right from the beginning, there's a freedom of thinking. We had Salah al-Asir, we had Muslim professors, and in the 50s, they were overwhelmingly, when you have Abbas and Najm and Al-Ghul and others, and since. And then you have the great professor in front of you, and yourself, etc. This AUB has always been liberal and if you want, multi-religious, but liberal. I mean, this is hidden, and the professors now we had are great. Like Anis Furaiha came from Chicago, Khalil Hawi from Cambridge, Anton Ghatas-Karam, Sorbonne, Doctorat d'État, and count like this. All
and from different disciplines too,
from different
right? Anis
disciplines.
Furaiha from Semitics.
Of course.
Khalil Hawi from philosophy.
Yeah.
Right.
Hawi, and this is another thing in the modern, Hawi worked on Gibran in Cambridge and Anton Ghatas-Karam on Gibran at the Sorbonne, and Jibra'il Jabbour from Princeton also. I mean, we had fantastic people in the department.
I'll come back to this Arabic between East and West or beyond, but I want to talk about world literature, and I want to first define the terms.
Yeah.
Right. You first introduced me to David Damrosch. You invited also him at AUB, who wrote What is World Literature?
Yeah.
So what is world literature? Is it, for example, third world literature with the third dropped, or it's something else? Yeah. And how does Arabic as a tradition fit into this category of world literature?
Yeah.
And then I'll talk more about the challenges and the gains, but what Arabic loses and what it gains when it's studied as world literature.
Yeah.
So what is world literature?
Well, as a matter of fact, because you mentioned Damrosch, our first meeting in Sweden, in Stockholm in 2004, I was at the same panel with David Damrosch. I didn't know him personally. I had taught him because he's the big man now in Harvard and this. I wrote for that about Majnoon in intertranscultural perspective. and showed how this simple story of Majnun Layla was disseminated in all kinds of culture, in theater, in the world, in America, in Germany, in Iran, etc. But I discussed what is world literature, and I wanted us to work as a history of the already transcultural texts. And they didn't want that. And unfortunately, those who didn't want that won. They wanted to have a transcultural history of text. Why? Because we had strong personalities representing Africa and Latin America, the two Americas. And their world history is meager, it's nothing. I mean, 400 years in Latin America or in Americas of oral, they didn't want to see what's already world literature and we study it. Anyway, in my approach, I did that. The first thing I asked myself, what do you want to know of, let's say, Indian literature, or Brazilian literature, or Nigerian literature? And I answered myself that I don't want to know details, because details come from here and get out from here.
And also not every text in Brazilian literature
Exactly.
is world literature.
Exactly.
As Jahez, for example, is not world literature.
Yeah,
probably.
unfortunately,
You know,
it's not world
there's
literature.
certain texts that count as world
Yeah.
literature.
Okay.
And what counts as world literature?
Can't see. This is very good. Jahez, for instance. Mutanabbi is not world
It's
literature.
not world literature.
I was struck because to ascertain objectively what I want to know is not detail. Okay, then I say, who is among our literary personalities a world person, or what work is world literature? And I put about 10 possibilities, which are, in fact, what I did. There was no GPT or but it was Google. I Googled them. My greatest surprise was that Ma'ari is 10 times better than Mutanabbi.
Yeah, because of Risalat al-Ghufran.
No, not only.
No, not only.
Also because Risalat al-Ghufran, ala rasi, but it wasn't translated yet. Who translated now?
Van Gelder.
Van Gelder and Georg Schürrle.
Interesting.
The Quran was superb, but the Quran is not world literature only. It's religion and legality and the hadith, but also you have the Mi'raj.
The Mi'raj
Mi'raj
story.
or Mi'raj is
Kalila
all-
wa Dimna.
Kalila wa Dimna, which is in the bad world literature. I analyze Kalila wa Dimna as being in the bad, and most of these works, if you want to count Kalila wa Dimna, Al-Qasida,
Al-Qasida.
there's two volumes, Al-Qasida as world literature, Al-Ghazal, this is, Goethe wrote Ghazal, and what else? Kalila wa Dimna.
Alif Layla wa Layla.
Of course, this is par excellence, the great work, and this I'm going to talk about it now. And of course, your contribution to the Maqama. Maqama is world literature, and
We made it.
all right. There are more mysticism and stuff like this.
Okay.
You Google them, and you're surprised. Most of them were confirmed that I thought it was, but you're surprised. Now, my second question, okay, what is common? As I asked, what do I want to know about Indian or Brazilian literature? Then I said, I want to know the basic characteristics of this literature. I don't want to know about who did what, because I'll forget that. Now I forget books that I've read yesterday, their names or I mean, at the end, this memory has a limit. Okay, then I thought, what's the characteristic of these 10 to 12 works? And there I saw that none of them was the work of one single person. Even if the one single person is the author, the content of the work is a collective thing. Even if you take Risal Ghufran, he was funny, he's shrewd, he يطبلها وبيملحها ويبهرها, but at the end he's discussing poetry by other poets, most of Risal Ghufran.
Right.
If you take Kalila wa Dimna, originally it was from the Panchatantra, over Persian, from India to Persian to Arabic. It's a story within a story. Most of the time it's this matchbook or Russian.
So it was born transcultural from the beginning.
Yeah, totally. And the best work of this type is 1001 Night. 1001 Night came from all kinds of sources, and it arrived from the Persian in a small book called Hizar Afsane, means 1000 حكاية, يعني legend أفسانة, because it's الهزار on the 1000 means many, but there was 228 story in it, and with time collectively they added to it until it became 1001 Night. And there is always to these collective words a frame story. In 1001 Nights, the very famous story of Shahrazad, of the Shahriyar, and betrayed by his wife, and then he goes to his brother in Iran and sees the brother is more betrayed than him, and he swears he'll never be betrayed in the future. Then he'll marry a virgin, and in the morning he kills her, so she has no chance to betray him. And if you don't know the story, it's fascinating. He goes around with his brother, and then suddenly they meet a giant sleeping under the tree. Now, before he sleeps, they see him from far. So they run away and climb a tree and hide in the tree. He comes and sleeps under the tree, and he has a woman with him. The woman sees them. He sleeps. The woman sees him. She says, come down, or I wake him up. So they come down. And then she says, make love to me. Or I wake him up, they make love to her, and give me your rings. They give her their rings. She opens the box, and she has plenty of rings in the box, and the giant is sleeping. So they conclude, there's no way. Women, of course, this is a particular view of women in those days. Women, you can't stop them. If they want to cheat on you, you cheat on you.
But this is also what's fascinating, is that women literature before writing, so adab al-haki, right, actually emphasizes the anxieties of men, even if it is actually on the tongue of women.
Of course.
Right, it's actually the man writing, it's adab al-haki.
Of course, but the beauty of Shahrazad is that this Shahriyar kills a woman, a virgin, every day. At the end, and he asks his vizier to bring him a virgin. At the end, there were no more virgin people. Then Shahrazad, the daughter of the vizier, tells him, send me to him, I'll marry him. And she said, she'll kill you. He says, send me to him, but I'll take my Dunyazad, my little sister, with me. And she starts telling stories. Dunyazad says, tell me a story before we sleep. She starts telling stories, and she cuts them. There was also the suspense, like in the story of Antara. We didn't mention Antara. Antara is there, very...
So what does Arabic literature gain when it's studied through the lens of world literature? Right, in conjunction with all these texts. Right, and you categorize them into wide geographic areas, for example, right? So I noticed, for example, Persian, Turkish, Arabic are in one section. Right. So what does Arabic literature gain when it's studied through this lens, and what does it lose?
I tell you what, Arabic literature has been, unfortunately, very badly approached by Western Orientalists and literary critics. They are shocked by what they call, it's made of bits and pieces. Especially all those who came after the Romantic movement. Enter Coleridge with his idea of organic unity. What is not organic is fancy. He had the creative imagination and he has fancy. Fancy in the West became surrealism. I mean, where is the creative imagination in Rimbaud or Apollinaire or Breton, Aragon, Essoupeau? They speak from their imagination as a dream. I mean, there's nothing that relates to the other thing. The Arabs wrote poetry. It was called like pearls at random strung. You don't know. This applies to the Quran.
Yeah.
And that's why maybe when Taha Hussein criticized poetry and said it was all invented, they were afraid that it applies to the Quran, because the Quran is not organically.
And you can enter it from any point.
Total. This is exactly for me the test if it's not organically done. And that's why I start the whole idea of composition in the Dardasha, in what used to be called Musamara. As-samar is that when you meet in the evening, instead of playing this musha'ara or suq huqas, you talk about anything that's interesting. That's interesting. You don't want to talk something. I mean, the other people in the evening say, this guy is boring. What is he talking about? You present the best stories you know, but there's no, it's min kull wadi asa yani. Al-hadith bil-hadith yudkar. Shaykh? In English they say talk begets talk. And in this form was the best choice of Arabic literature, in which a poem is composed of single verses. The line is the unit. And the great Al-Farahidi, Al-Khalil ibn Ahmad, makes the parallel between what he calls Bayt al-Sha'r and Bayt al-Sha'r, yani al-Khayma, and analyzes the verse, the line, as a khayma. Shu yani? Amud al-Sha'r is the amud of the khayma, the pillar, the central pillar. Al-Arud, ism al-prosody in Arabic, al-Arud, this is al-Arida, that is the horizontal plank that goes from one pole to the other in the middle of the tent. Al-Misra' or al-Shatr, Misra'ain, al-Sadr, wal-Kaza are the door of the Misra', of the door. And then this tent, this Bayt al-Sha'r, is supported or held by an sabab, yani rope, and wetted. The thing is meal you put in the tank. It's totally the whole structure, but it's the structure of the verse. He never mentions the poem. It's the unity of the verse. And from there are many metaphors of structures of literary works. Some compare it to a body, هذا organic, or to a tree, or some now, like Moretti, who's now very famous for his wave theory and for very interesting thing that he is distant reading and not close reading. Yani, as I wanted to do without knowing. But let me just continue my theory. If a verse, if a line is a tent, then a poem is what? It's a camp. When static, it's a camp. Or it's a caravan when in movement. What does relay these tents in a camp? The spirit of those in the camp. And what does relay the camels traveling from one place to the other? The purpose, al-qasd, al-qasida. And this applies to the Quran. The Quran is unbelievably misread in the West. إنه شو هذا؟ C'est un puzzle. Jacqueline Chabi said, c'est un puzzle. يعني you have to put its different pieces together, otherwise you don't understand the thing. And if you let me just finish this point, the greatest admirer of the Prophet is Thomas Carlyle, the end of the 18th century. In his famous book on heroes and hero worship, heroism and hero worship, whom does he choose as a prophet hero? The hero as prophet, Muhammad. He chooses Muhammad. At the time when people thought of Muhammad as impostor and a false prophet, and any great Muslim believer would envy this fantastic, passionate admiration of Thomas Carlyle for the Prophet Muhammad, for his sincerity, and this is my case too. For his sincerity, for his passionate dedication, devotion to the unicity of God, of the unicity of the Ummah. But when he talks of the Quran, you would have your face blushed of. He insults this. What is this incondite? What is this stupidity? One understands nothing. He jumps from one sentence to the other, and he represents, in that sense, most of the Western scholars who speak in a more lukewarm and diplomatic way. But that has awakened me to the fact that they're not ready to understand a different aesthetics and a different worldview that is represented by Arabic literature and by Islamic worldview. They're not ready to understand that. And this is what world literature serves Arabic literature.
Interesting. So the performativity of the text, the musamara, the muhadara part, the links between these texts are obvious as well, and they also present a worldview of that culture, right? Vis-a-vis other worldviews from different cultures, right? But what happens to the texts from that tradition that do not adhere to this aesthetics, right? So, because this is also dangerous. It's very informative, and it brings Arabic literature into a worldly, global plateau, right? But also, you lose things that people from that tradition, right? The Arabic tradition, consider as their representative. For example, Mutanabbi, for example, does not hold a chance in this, right?
I'm not.
So are there limitations to this approach?
No, I'm open to all of this literature. I love Mutanabbi. I know him by heart, and I think he's great. But as Rahiz says, poetry is not translatable. This is the problem. I'm talking about those who cross the linguistic and cultural boundaries. I have to analyze what's in my hand. And I know that Mutanabbi, for instance, Al-Ma'arri in his Luzumiyat is an intellectual. He's a cerebral, cerebral. He's not, has no emotion at all. He's a calculator, and the Luzum also. But they admire him now as a skeptic. There is no other poet in the world. A little bit Al-Khayyam, who copied Ma'arri and Abu Nuwas. I have an article on that. It's a mixture of Ma'arri and Abu Nuwas.
So Ma'arri changes his face when he gets translated.
Ma'arri is unbelievable in the Luzumiyya especially, and of course in the in the Salk Lofran, where he's very sarcastic.
Okay, now that we know the big picture, world literature as a category, I want to go into the details, and I want to single out the story of Majnun, because you have worked so much on Majnun, right? In addition to this book, I can count 4 or 5 articles on Majnun Layla. The legend of Majnun Layla has traveled across cultures and time periods as well, even within the Arabic tradition, right? Of course, Persian, Hindu, Punjabi, you name it, German, etc. Across genres as well, play, movie, opera. The first Islamic opera was actually Majnun in Azerbaijan. What do you think makes the story so adaptable and universal? Like Majnun touches everyone.
Yeah.
Why?
Majnun's story is a very simple story, very simple. You can tell it in 4 lines, Majnun, there are 2 versions. Either he used to play and tend the sheep with Layla as kids, or he met her as a young man courting with women around, and she makes him believe that she's interested in somebody else, and he starts writing poetry of love to her, and the ruwat, the storytellers, invent the cause of the problem is that an Arab woman who's sung in ghazal should not marry the man who is writing ghazal about her. They were not writing, saying ghazal about her. She should marry another one to prove that she is still a virgin. So when he asks her hand, they reject him. And with time he becomes mad of love. And sorry, Ululi, Mamnuna. He becomes mad, and the difference between Majnun and the other love poems, poets like Jamil Busayna, Kthayr Azza, or Qais ibn Zarih, or many others, is that he is factually the metaphor of being in love, mad in love, he lives it. He becomes mad. He's absent-minded the whole time, plays with the earth, or the end he lives in the desert with wild animals, which is a metaphor also of a paradisiac being, like before the fall, the animals guard him. And then I discovered that this is what C.G. Jung calls an archetypal pattern. It's an archetype. Jung, differently from Freud, places below the consciousness, the popular consciousness, what he calls collective subconscious, instead of an individual subconscious. The collective subconscious produces archetypes, works on archetypes. And I discovered that Majnun is really the only archetype, triad, love, mad, and poetry. If you cut out any of these sides of the triangle, you don't get Majnun. You get somebody who's mad in love, or is a poet and lover. But the triad is Majnun, and he lives it in his flesh and body. Okay? Now, why is Majnun so popular and so widely disseminated? Because he functions on the lower collective subconscious, which is much more common across cultures. If you look at the earth, the differences are in the external topography of the earth, on mountains and rivers. The deeper you go down in the earth, the more equal or the same materials. It's either iron or fire, etc. I mean, the outside, the external existence is so different from each other. Majnun functions on the lower and more common collective subconscious. That's why it passes easily to other cultures. And it's astounding, really, how many cultures have used this and gave it a super place. You know, the first opera in Baku was the story of Majnun. The first, it has a symphony in America, it has an operette in German, in all languages. It passed first to the Persian. The Nizami's biggest epic romance, Layli wa Majnun, is Layli wa Majnun, among his Khamsa. In Fuzuli, who was the Turk Ottoman in Baghdad, also his famous, he was trilingual, this one, but his famous work is Majnun. But the crowning of this, that led me to Majnun, is Le Fou d'Elsa of Aragon. It's an epic, and it's the best work of Aragon. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm lucky. Some chance, just luck, just coincidence. I was in Freiburg in 1963 in a college building and listening, because Freiburg is very close to France, listening to French radio. And there was on Sundays a series of 10 interviews by some Francis Crémieux with Aragon on Le Fou d'Elsa, the madman of Elsa. Elsa is the wife of... and I forgot it, it's 163. In 67 or 8, I had finished my work for an MA in Princeton again, and then I started seeking a subject. I wanted to work in world literature and more, and I thought of Islamic and Arabic, Persian, and Turkish. I thought of Jaha, and Jaha is Arabic, and the three cultures claim that they're but it is Arabic 100% because it's mentioned many times in Abu Hayyan Tawhidi already. Jaha. They call him Nasruddin and Hoja in Iran, or 1001 Nights, and wanted to work on the arabesque as in literature. And at Princeton, every Thursday of the month, first Thursday of the month, they used to sell for cheap, dirt cheap money, the double volumes that they used to receive. Like you receive 4 copies of a certain new book that would cost $3-4 then, but they sell it for 50 cents, and you see students standing by the door until they open and they take all the books. But the German books and French books were not sought, so I see a collection, Segers damals, it used to be the poetry books. I see Aragon, I take it. The moment I open the door, the book, it is Le Fou d'Elsa. It made
So in my work on world Sufism, mysticism, right, I noticed the Majnun in other cultures, the Punjab region, for example, is actually the woman. It's actually the woman. She's the one who loses her mind, right? Epic of Sassi, for example, or Sassi Vapanan and others, right? But it's always a Sufi story with Sufi interpretation. And one thing that I learned from your book and your research is that it's not only that mysticism is employing the story of Majnun, but actually the story of Majnun was probably written from the beginning with these mystical inclinations. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so near. The mystics called him Ayine Persians, Ayine Khuda. He's the mirror of God. And Layli becomes also the kind of cup that he drinks, the intoxication of the wine, of divine wine. In Arabic, I noticed like a shibli, because Majnun is concocted, his poetry. You see, his poetry is made of poetry for about 30 poets. There's somebody called Sarraj who collected his. You see, in practically every verse has someone else who said it or attributed to somebody else. A lot of it are of some of this period. Abu Hussein Nouri, Shibli, and it's very.
So the influence is both ways.
There are verses that cannot be interpreted but mystically. في كل منزلة ديوان, what is the beginning? في كل منزلة ديوان معرفة المنزلة هون is nothing there.
Now looking back, after all these years from working on Majnun Layla and world literature, in addition to Adonis and Qasim Haddad, and I can mention many contributions, right? So looking back on your career, what do you feel has been your most important contribution to Arabic literature, literary studies? But also, what questions do you hope future scholars will continue to explore about Arabic literature's place in the world? Because there is a message here to the many students in the room. Where do you think they should put their effort?
Wonderful. If I started with my childhood also, because I had the luck to accept as a child. Every morning we played together from dawn to sunset with all kinds of religions, languages for us also. You didn't understand always Egyptian at the beginning, then you learn it. And the schools I went in schools that are Orthodox, Maronite, evangelical, Arabic in the 8 years. It was more English than Arabic. So you have 3 languages in your childhood. And then, of course, Beirut, and then I came to IC. IC was wonderful, yani. I hope, I tried to teach my students and to be opened. What Heidegger calls Gelassenheit. If you want to understand the world, you have to have this Gelassenheit, this kind of relaxing serenity. Go into and accept, open yourself to a new experience. Don't go with preconceived ideas and biases and this is written by so and so, ideologies. This is what makes us richer, and this is my call to my Western colleagues and students. Don't start with Arabic literature, or especially with the Quran or with this bias. It has to conform to your thinking of what a good poem is. And not only scholars. I sat once at the Rhine and on the German side in a restaurant, but in Europe, if you don't find a place, you can ask people who are still a chair, can I sit with you? Ahlan wa sahlan. So I sat with a French family. The man is a big army officer from Saint-Cyr. These people are extremely well-read, intelligent, top in France are the Saint-Cyr. He says, what are you doing? He said, I teach Arabic and Persian and Islamic studies. Islamic studies? Do you understand the Quran? He said, yes.
I tried.
He said, well, what is this? I started reading, couldn't understand the thing. He jumps from one thing, you know, if you start with Surah Al-Baqarah, Al-Baqarah is a Quran in a nutshell. Of course, there are about 22 subjects inside, and for these people, he doesn't want to enjoy. I said, look, Surah Al-Baqarah, nobody knows it up by heart, but they know, like in poetry, one verse, one ayah, Ayat al-Kursi or Noor or etc. al-Mishkat, but they don't learn it. And this is how it was revealed. It's maybe a puzzle
So the advice is to come to the text with an open mind.
Totally.
And without packages.
I think Arabic literature will be much better understood if you instill in the minds of these people that they are at fault, that this is another aesthetics, and they must enter it on its own ground, on its own right, and not come with a straight jacket and you want to make them you wear it. This is the idea. And it is working. Because now my students in Germany are heads of departments everywhere.
I'll skip my questions on Nahda because I want to give some time to the students and the audience to ask you questions as well. Questions to Assaad Khairallah.
Ramzi.
Thank you, Dr. Assaad, for the deep dialogue. And I'd like to ask you that you were one of the founders of Majallat Sha'ar in the late 50s, or at least one of the good teamwork. I would like to know some of your memories about Majallat Sha'ar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sulaiman. Yes, I was with Adonis, as a matter of fact, before Majallat Sha'ar. I wrote a poem in Salon Nadi. We used to issue a very nice, exceptionally high degree majalla at the high school in the IC. IC was, there's nothing greater than IC. صدى النادي. صوت الشباب كان بالانجلش section. The French section had صدى النادي. Look at the brevet level. I had Munah Khouri, who I wrote him a report on Al-Aidi al-Qadira, Dirty Hands of Sartre, with 15 years old. In the second, we had Khalil Zakaria, who was a kind of surrealist. Ansil Hajj talk about him a lot. In premiere, Munah Khouri for Naqd, and Anton Ghattas Karam for Adab. And then Anton Ghattas Karam in philosophy. In Naqd we read T.S. Eliot, Aswat Sha'ar Thalatha, etc. So I wrote a poem in Sada Nadi, which I used to issue with Tuma Arida, rahimahullah. Okay? Adonis reads it and calls me. He was just a refugee, after the killing of Maliki in many of the Syrian Nationalist Party came to Lebanon. And he called me to his circle. And I was the youngest. I was still in the baccalaureate. There were many, Ilyas Dairi, Ilyas Maqsid Ilyas, Nazir Al-Admi, Halim Barakat, Munir Bashur. There were very many writers, either short story or qasas or shu'ara. And he was living at Shuran, so off Sadat. It was fascinating. Yeah, Sa'id Taqi-Din used to come. It was a phenomenon. And later when Yusuf al-Khal came back and started preparing Sha'ar, also I was in Khamis Sha'ar. We used to meet in Plaza Hotel and also in Nadi al-Qawmi al-Arabi, in Maqdisi Abdul Aziz, or in the Alumni Club. But I left all political things when I came to the university. As always, because I always felt that people are lying and are, in a way, betraying their ideals, as is super present in Lebanon, alhamdulillah. And then I went into a kind of existentialist phase, reading Sartre, and with René Habashi, especially the Christian existentialists like Gabriel Marcel and these people. But I remained very close. Yani my first meeting with Yusuf Khal was very nice, and he kept telling me, "You are a poet. You are a poet." And Adonis, whenever he saw me, I wrote a lot of poetry in my life for myself. You know, I have now a lot. What beautiful. When I was writing my dissertation at Princeton, yani poetry was going down as if your nose is bloody. You don't know where it comes. I never published it. I have very, unfortunately, you know, scholarship makes your mind much more present as needed. Poetry wants the junoon in it, as Plato says. You know, it wants the daimon. And not the thinking.
Dr.
Yani
Malbaki?
it needs mutanabbi more than Ma'ari.
Bushra? Please.
Can I ask the question now?
Yeah.
Okay. I've always been interested in the dichotomies, West, East, the one, the other, here, there. If we're talking about Arabic literature as part of world literature, can we still talk about dichotomies today or no?
This is lovely as a question. This is lovely. It depends on the one talking. For me, literature coming out of Lebanon is a super example of world literature because, as I was saying, our professors, and we grow up, most of us, with 3 languages, some with more. Like my kids speak 4 languages with German on top of that. Many people here know maybe Spanish in addition to French and English. I used to give a lecture on Lebanon in Germany. The first part was its history. And the second part, because they were interested in the political problems, as I went to Germany after Civil War. We went to Germany as a visiting out of the Civil War, and we stayed there. Anyway, if you consider the history of Lebanon, you see that the whole area of the Mutawassit, yani, until Alexandria, especially the Syrian area, yani Bilad Sham, Alexandretta, Alexander, and Alexandra from Alexander. Alexander means 333 before Christ. Yeah? And then he occupied here. It went to 636, 37 when the Arab invasion came, which means exactly 1,000 years of Greco-Roman culture, with their ideas, with their laws, with their languages, with their philosophies, with their whatever. They were here 1,000 years, the Greeks and the Romans. Christ is born under the Romans. And then 200 years of crusaders, 1090 to 1290, okay? That makes 1,200 years. And then the colonialist imperialists, starting with 1838 in Tunis and 82 in Egypt and 1920 in Lebanon, Syria. And so we have practically half this area, a Western culture dominating or trying to dominate with us here. We cannot be really Oriental like Afghanistan or like any other country in the world. We are born in this country. As I talked about myself, you know, I started as a kid with 2 books. In Lebanon, you start always Arabic, French, or Arabic, English. And then the other language is learned. So we are almost destined to be multiple, international, and world consciousness.
Questions to Assaad Khairallah, also students, if you want to say something about your experience in his classes. There are many students who studied with Assaad Khairallah who are here today. Please.
Finito.
Okay.
They're all convinced.
Ladies and gentlemen, this was Assaad Khairallah and world literature.
Thank you.
The discussion will continue. There is a reception. Please feel free to come talk to Dr. Khairallah. Also, Mariam, you wanted to say something as well.
Maria.